Well, it has been nearly 7 months since an explosion at the Givaudan plant in the Clifton neighborhood killed 2 workers, sent 12 others to the hospital, and damaged homes and businesses nearby. And we're continuing to learn more about what happened inside that factory before the blast. I want to bring in WDRB digital reporter Marcus Green. Marcus, you've been staying on top of it for us. There's new information in the investigation, and you've obtained a state report. What does it show?
That's right. This report here is the Kentucky Labor Cabinet's report into the blast. It basically looked to see if there were workplace safety violations. One of the big takeaways, Gil, is that these investigators found that the issue that happened with this cooking vessel, this valve vent that was stuck, occurred about a year before the blast. Now, there was a communication difference. They called it a false communication, where an operator's screen showed that the valve was 100% open. That would have relieved pressure on this vessel as it was overheating. However, the actual valve, the physical position, was only 5% open. So this issue that was documented about a year before the blast, similar issue to what happened on the day of that fatal explosion. You can see on the screen right there that vent valve. This is a valve that about a year before the blast, again, investigators found that it was not operating properly.
So you said 5% open. Give us context. Is it supposed to be fully open? Is it supposed to be 100% open?
The report doesn't say, but they expected it was 100% open. That was what the operator's screen showed. Had it been 100% open, presumably it would have been able to relieve pressure faster. In other words, there was a miscommunication between what was shown on the screen and what was actually happening in reality.
And so just, again, more context. If something's only 5% open, it's only seeping out what it's supposed to be, venting.
Correct.
All right, so what kinds of violations did the report find?
So again, these inspections are trying to look at specific federal regulations, whether they're followed. There were 3 main safety violations, all considered serious. One of them was a general duty violation, meaning that the plant wasn't operating in a safe manner. Second, it noted some violations related to eye protection. And third, it noticed some violations related to emergency routes in the case of a kind of catastrophe like the one that happened last November. So the state has fined the company $21,000. There hasn't yet been a contest of that. The company has not challenged that violation. That's typical, though, in these types of cases. We did reach out to Givaudan today. They're not commenting. They say there's still more conversations happening with the Labor Cabinet.
There's also a federal investigation happening from the Chemical Safety Board, correct? And where does that stand?
Well, we don't know because they won't return any of our phone calls and emails. But that investigation, once it's complete, is not going to have a kind of legal standard. But what it typically does will recommend some changes and some perhaps safety standards that can be implemented across the industry to hopefully prevent something like this from happening again. Of course, as we should always note in these stories, Gil, the type of incident that happened last November, very, very similar to what happened in 2003 when one worker was killed at the D.D. Williamson plant. And
so looking at that, 2003 and today, is $21,000 in fines the only sanctioning that this company now will face?
Well, you have to remember, we've also got the potential, and I would underscore potential, for a criminal charge. That's something that state inspectors with the Housing and Building and Constructions Department has recommended could be. They've suggested that there could be criminal charges filed. Now, the Jefferson County Attorney's Office told us earlier this year that they're not in the business of looking into that angle. There's also civil lawsuit pending in Jefferson Circuit Court. That could result in some monetary fines, some judgments. So we've got a lot of things happening at once. This report, though, today simply looks at very specific workplace standard violations.
Criminal charges were also considered back in 2003, but ultimately did not move forward. All right, thank you, Marcus, for staying on top of it. We will look for your latest article right now on WDRB.com.